السلام عليكم الحضور الكرام. معكم سارة عمر من سفراء قمة إرثنا الشباب، واليوم يسعدني أن أقدم لكم جلستنا وهي دراسة حالة تحت عنوان شبكة المدن الجافة. تواجه المدن في المناطق القاحلة وشبه القاحلة والصحراوية مجموعة من التحديات الملحة، بما في ذلك ندرة المياه والحرارة الشديدة والموارد المحدودة والنظم البيئية الهشة. تتطلب هذه الظروف الفريدة حلولاً مبتكرة وجهوداً تعاونية لضمان حياة حضرية مستدامة. ستستعرض هذه الجلسة شبكة المدن القاحلة ACN، وهي مجموعة من المراكز الحضرية المكرسة لمواجهة هذه التحديات من خلال تبادل المعرفة والتقنيات المتطورة واستراتيجيات إدارة الموارد المستدامة التي تعزز المرونة وتمكن المدن من الازدهار في ظل المتطلبات الفريدة للبيئات القاحلة. Let me introduce Anthony Flint, Senior Fellow, Lincoln Institute of Land Policy. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. I'm Anthony Flint, Senior Fellow at the Lincoln Institute of Land Policy. We're a global think tank based in Cambridge, Massachusetts. But apropos of the subject today, also home to the Babbitt Center for Land and Water Policy, which is located in Phoenix, Arizona, which I would argue is a clear candidate, perhaps, to be part of this Arid Cities Network that we'll be talking about today. It's a metropolitan region that is grappling with extreme heat and water shortages. I recently interviewed the mayor of Phoenix, Kate Gallego, as part of a series we call Mayor's Desk. I encourage everyone to check that out. It's Q&As with local leaders from around the world. And she has been a real innovator and leader in adaptation and resilience in this context, encouraging things like native plantings and rock gardens instead of thirsty lawns out in the desert southwest of the United States. At the Babbitt Center, named for the former governor of Arizona and former Interior Secretary, he was also a board member of the Lincoln Institute, our aim has been to integrate land use policy and water resource management and really make those things go hand in hand. In Arizona, for example, developers can't proceed with any new building without demonstrating where the water is going to come from. And there are serious shortages of this precious resource, as there are so many straws in the Colorado River and the Colorado River Basin, which has been quite seriously depleted, not least due to the impacts of climate change. Our topic today, cities in arid, semi-arid, and desert regions are on the front lines of the climate crisis, confronting increasingly urgent challenges such as water scarcity, extreme temperatures, and ecosystem fragility. These challenges, compounded by rapid urban growth and resource constraints, demand context-specific and cooperative solutions. This final plenary session will formally introduce the notion of the Arid Cities Network, a new collaborative initiative uniting urban centers from across the globe that face these shared environmental and development pressures. The network aims to foster innovation, promote the exchange of local and traditional knowledge, and support the development and application of sustainable technologies and practices tailored to arid environments. So with arid cities very much on our minds, so to start off this conversation, I'd like to invite David Simon, Professor of Development Geography at the Royal Holloway, University of London, to set the stage with sharing some early findings of the soon-to-be released Earthna Research Arid Cities Network Challenges and Needs Assessment for 6 pilot arid cities. After that, we'll introduce our panelists and have a conversation. But for now, Professor Simon, over to you.
Thank you very much, Anthony, and it's a great pleasure to be here with you all. I've been working with the Earthna Center to develop, originally as launched here at the first summit 2 years ago, a policy brief working through some of the ideas that underpin this initiative, and now working on a needs assessment which has involved research in a sample of 6 cities around the world to try to understand how different stakeholders in them perceive and experience the problems that are directly and indeed indirectly linked to climate and broader environmental change, and then to assess the perceptions and the extent to which they would be interested in engaging with joining the Arid Cities Network in whatever shape that it takes once we launch it officially. And we've deliberately chosen a representative sample, 3 of them in the Middle East, North Africa region for obvious reasons, given the base here in Doha, but crucially also to represent the diversity of conditions both within the Middle East, North Africa, but more widely in arid and semi-arid zones around the world. So the other 3, Jaipur in Rajasthan in India, Sevilla and Andalusia in Spain, and Lima, the capital of Peru, and incidentally the only megacity within this sample. Of course, it's not exhaustive, and we expect to enlarge it, as we've just heard, and there's a whole series of considerations which indeed could well form part of the discussion in the rest of this session. The research, we focused around 2 clusters of interests that Earthna was keen to pursue, relating to resource sustainability, the first cluster, and then sustainability of the built environment, the second cluster, and you'll see there very prominently the ideas about harnessing existing reservoir of traditional and indigenous knowledge systems, always in the plural because there are multiple, and how they can be combined with some of contemporary technologies and designs and architectures about which we've heard a whole series of panels over the last couple of days, not in a sort of nostalgic sense of wanting to go back in time a certain number of 100 years, but in a constructive and forward-looking way of hybridizing or syncretizing, if you prefer, these principles of design with current materials and technologies. And this is now increasingly widely recognized around the world and has emerged as one of the top priorities. I'm going to run through 4 examples of the work without having time to go into it in more detail, but when we release the report formally, all the details will be there. But I think the key message across all of this is that even within those 6 cities, there is huge diversity on every single variable in every single respect. And the first one, of course, is trying to understand the governance arrangements for cities. And you can see there variation in population size, but crucially also the governance structure. Sometimes, as in Lima, it's a megacity. There are 51 district municipalities. In Jaipur, there was 1 municipal corporation, which a few years ago got broken into 2. It wasn't an ideal arrangement, and there are some interesting consequences. Marrakesh, again, it has 5 arrondissements, but in all these cases, the balance of powers, responsibilities, and resources between the city government of whatever form, the regional, provincial, state government, whatever form, and the national government vary hugely. And as in the world at large, most commonly there is a mismatch between those 3 headings: capacities, resources, and responsibilities. And therein lie a series of challenges when it comes to so-called wicked societal problems like climate and environmental change. The second example was understanding, if you like, the water equation, how water is obtained, how it is distributed, the extent to which, if at all, it is recycled and reused around principles of the circular economy, and the balance to which or in which there is either demand management or just a focus on supply augmentation. And again, you can see some of the headlines there. The third example, which again is increasingly important, and we've had several sessions touching on these themes at the summit, is the question of the food supply and the extent to which urban and peri-urban agriculture already contributes to that, or what potential there might be to increase that in the future. And as you'll see at the bottom, one of the things, and the FAO, amongst others, have been championing this now for a number of years, is not just focusing on the city, however defined in terms of food supply, but on the city region, the functional urban area, which includes the peri-urban and adjacent parts of the rural area, because this is often a source, it's where many other resources come from, and it's often also where waste from the city is distributed or landfilled or recycled. And then fourthly, as I've already alluded to, the importance of cultural heritage, traditional and indigenous knowledge forms, which includes architecture, construction standards, appropriateness to prevailing environmental conditions, and crucially, appropriateness to anticipated future conditions in the context of increasing extreme heat, more frequent extreme events, flipping between extreme heat and cold, and indeed, literally just yesterday, a new study was released in Nature Communications, which shows categorically how one dimension of our climate change experience all around the world is very rapid flips, sometimes within 24 hours from extreme heat to reasonably extreme cold or something in between and back again, which has all sorts of consequences we don't have time to explore today. 4 of these 6 cities are either World Heritage cities or at least have World Heritage sites there, which opens up another series of avenues that we've already explored and established connections, because that enables us to work with UNESCO around these issues, which are very much forward-looking about conservation, wise utilization, engaging with UN Habitat, the UN Specialist Agency for Human Settlements, and so on. We addressed a series of key questions that are up there on the screen. Indeed, these will recur in one form or another during the discussion now, which are really just posing questions to representatives of the cities, to our panelists, whether things have been missed in the study, to what extent other city networks of which cities are a member could be brought into conversation with the establishment of the ACN, and so on. And then there we go. These are broadly the key outcomes so far from the assessment, that despite all the differences I alluded to, there are many similarities to different extents and in different fields. There are locally appropriate solutions, and in some cases locally inappropriate solutions being implemented that would be really interesting to explore and to share. And then the need for peer learning as a sort of knowledge-sharing platform for good practice, very much amongst the interests reflected by the cities. So the Earthna Center has been thinking about dividing up some of the priorities into what can be done in the first couple of years after establishment, the sort of quick wins, building on what is already going on, and then another series of topics for the medium to longer term where preparation and buy-in and so on would need to take place first. And then finally, we had a round table yesterday morning, drawing in a wide range of expertise, and on this, the final slide, I've just highlighted a series of the key suggestions and points that were raised, and which again will resonate, I'm sure, with the discussion. So thank you very much, and I'll hand back to Anthony.
All right, fantastic, thank you. I'm going to take my seat here, and I will invite our distinguished panelists to come up to the stage all at once, beginning with Ibrahim Thiaw, Undersecretary General and Executive Secretary at the United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification, Engineer Ali Al-Kawari, the CEO of Mashari Properties, Rafael Lopez Aliaga, Mayor of Lima, Peru. Your Honor, thank you for joining us. And finally, Terry Wills, Director of Climate at the Children's Investment Fund Foundation, joining us from London. Thank you all for being part of this conversation. Mr. Mayor, let's start with you, if we can. Tell us what's going on in Lima as a way of introducing some of these shared challenges facing cities in arid and semi-arid regions today. I was interested to learn about the rainfall in Lima as it compares to Doha. Actually, you get a bit less, is that right? It's incredible because I don't think most people understand fully just how arid Lima is. But if you can tell us a little bit about what's going on in Lima, and that will introduce some of these shared challenges. And if I may, in the interest of time, if you can please do so in under 5 minutes. So that is your challenge.
First, thanks for the invitation. A pleasure to be here. I was explaining yesterday some points. I will reduce the issues, but we need to start with Lima. 13 million people living. No rains. High humidity, yes. We have 3 rivers. There are some people that has no water at all, 1 million or maybe more, 1.5 million without water. And they buy water very expensive, $20 per cubic meter. That is 10 times that regularly one pays when you have water, access to water. My first solution, like mayor, was implementing emergency system. The emergency system is to pump water from downhill, because the poor people live in the uphill zones of the city. Then we are pumping water with private money, because there is no budget for this issue. We're pumping water. Now we have 500,000 people with water. There are faucets 50 meters distance from his house, but every family has water all the day, clean water. No, they may drink the water. This is a solution, but yesterday I was talking about policies, because it's not fair that some people in Lima may have a pool with drinking water, no, and they fill the pool with water, and other portion of the people have no water. Then I was talking yesterday about the subsidy, a cross subsidy to use that money without using the current state-owned company, because the corruption in that company, the expert knows very well Lima. We are proposing to create a parallel institution to manage the money with private management, to provide all the infrastructure to provide water to the poor people that amounts like 2 million people. Another solution we are implementing in Lima is the participation of volunteers. Volunteers are supporting the municipality. Like we have an app. We have created a municipal app. The range is about 100,000 young people that help us every weekend reach to the poor people that is in the uphill zones of Lima. And they cooperate with planting trees, 1 million trees, for changing the climate. To put this 1 million program in the highlands, they change everything. The climate changes. It's very less hot, not for the people. Another issue is using the water, because Lima is the only capital in front of the sea in South America. Then our intention is to establish desalination plants to provide water, and also get rid of the intermediation system, because there is a dramatic intermediation system. People that has power, political power, and sells the water 10 times the real value. It's the dramatic situation. We need to get rid of this system, no? But we have the water in front of us. But in 40 or 50 years, nobody has implemented this easy solution that in the Arab world is normal, it's something regular. You use the water. The Pacific Ocean has no problem with the salinization, because it's a current water, no problem to put salt on the sea. There are other issues that they will develop, like having these 3 rivers in the zone of Lima with channels to capture the water, and also another initiative that uses the people in Lima and the highlands. They have a program that is called like a water generator. No? It's an atmosphere water generator. The people has a system to trap the water from the humidity. And it's something that is very, very interesting, because it's an initiative of the people, ancient initiative of the people. And we are fostering that initiative. There are many issues that we may develop in the conversations. Thank you.
Yes, I'm sure they will arise through the course of the conversation. Mr. Secretary, turning to you, I think some people forget there is indeed a conference of the parties dedicated to these issues, along with the COPs for climate, of course, and biodiversity. Can you talk a little bit about that and just share your perspective on how arid cities are confronting these compounding challenges of climate stress, socioeconomic pressure, and resource scarcity?
Thank you. Yes, people think that there is only one COP, but actually COP is a conference of the parties. And for the Convention to Combat Desertification that I have the honor of leading, we had our last COP in Riyadh. So one of the cities that is probably one of the potential candidates to any network of cities in arid lands. Look, there are 3.2 billion people that are affected by dry land, by aridity, land degradation in the world. There are close to 600 cities of more than 300,000 inhabitants that are found in dry lands. So do you math how many people live in these cities? Out of the 3.2 billion, actually quite half of them live in cities. So you have the normal statistics here about urbanization. The characteristics of these cities are the following: water scarcity, as was mentioned before, so that's obvious. But think about energy. These cities are really focused, I mean, they are affected by heat and sometimes extreme heat. Therefore, their problem is not heating, their problem is cooling. And that is a lot of energy to be consumed. So on average, it is considered that cities consume 70% of the energy of the world. It's probably more or less the same patterns as for cities in drylands. The second pattern, which is very specific to cities in drylands, is sand and dust storms. Every year, 2 billion tons of topsoil are lifted by nature, sometimes flying over oceans and affecting health and and human activities, affecting productivity in the world. So cities located in drylands, some cities located in drylands face up to 200 days per year of dust storms. It's a major problem. Sometimes even the visibility is affected. Sometimes airports are closed or ports are affected. So it is affecting the economy as well. It is also affecting security because even radars, military radars, cannot function properly. So it is a serious issue in most countries. You know that the Suez Canal was blocked a few years ago by a support tanker, not that they lost their road, but because they were affected by sand and dust storms. So it's a major problem. The other issue that is really specific for cities in drylands is to revegetailize. Greening cities is a challenge because, first of all, there is no water, and if there is, you better give them to your population rather than irrigate gardens and have nice flowers. Of course, you can use wastewater, but that wastewater should be treated first, and in most countries, of developing countries, 90% of the wastewater is not treated. So you cannot even use that wastewater for planting or for revegetailizing your streets. So it's a very concern by hundreds of cities from around the world, close to 600 cities, as I said. So this idea of having a network of cities in dryland is not a small idea. I think it should be explored because there are billions of people that are affected by this, and their voice are not heard in most conferences that we have been to, and this is certainly an initiative that we support as UNCCD.
Well, thank you. Certainly a very troubling phenomenon. Just the other day in Iraq, the dust and sandstorms and all of the implications of that. Another factor to think about. Ali Al-Kuwari, by the way, I'm an unabashed tourist. I had an incredibly wonderful tour of the downtown. Including underneath, and very impressive with what the system was built in terms of using gray water and recycling water efficiently, and the air conditioning district energy system. What lessons can we draw from traditional urbanism, architecture, and time-tested knowledge systems to navigate some of these urban challenges in arid climates?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me as a part of this panel discussion. It is a very important topic, and I do agree that we have a very serious issue, and I hope our city, Msharab downtown Doha, is not part of the 600 cities that you are talking about. In fact, we knew about those challenges 17 years ago when we start designing the old downtown of Doha. So we put all these challenges in the map, and we address all the issues and try to come up with a mitigation plan and see how we can overcome all these issues. So we ask all our designers and also the engineers to come up with a permanent solution, sustainable solution that can sustain and also help us when we come to operations. So the first thing that we did is actually we redesigned the whole downtown based on our roots. We looked at our traditional, our people, how they used to build their own house, their home, their village. So we are not actually reinventing the wheel. We are just taking what used to be easy in building the house. For example, we consider the wind directions. Most of the time it's coming from north. So basically you're just gonna rotate the orientation of your house facing the wind direction. And another method that we use in the development, we keep the buildings very close to each other just to ensure that we have the shade most of the time during the days, and also to catch the breeze coming from north directions. So these are the few steps that we use during our master planning that goes around all the 400,000 square meters that you went through this morning. So we believe those challenges can be addressed and easily eliminated by applying some of these concepts, by adding some of these modern innovation creativity, such as sustainability and smart solutions.
Well, the shade alone is, it seems like there's always some shade around somewhere close by as you're walking about.
We study the sunrise and yes, we study the sunrise and sunset of the sun, and that's why we created that orientation.
So important. I also interviewed the mayor of Sierra Leone, of Freetown, Sierra Leone, Yvonne Aki Sawyer. She hired the Africa's first chief heat officer. And one of the first things they did was just put shade over the open air marketplaces. And it was an intervention that just instantly improved quality of life.
Exactly. I think we managed to reduce around 30% of the heat when we do those shade concept. And plus, by applying such a technique, we manage also to reduce the water consumption by around 70%. If you do similar projects that we invested on around 20 billion Qatari riyal, which is 5.5 US dollars, you would be spending more than 70 or 80% of the power and electric consumption in the city. So these techniques is proven. We've been in operation for almost 5 years now. We see the numbers. We have very good collection of data that such a concept can be replicated in any other cities.
So simple, so intuitive.
Very simple.
And so attractive for the urban environment. Terry Wills, we're going to talk about all of the issues facing arid cities, but I want to turn to this notion of a network and ask you about that, just to start off with. What would an Arid Cities Network look like? And what are the considerations as Earthna and partners move ahead with this idea? There are lots of other networks out there, and so how might this fit in?
Yeah, it's a great question, and just first of all, it's wonderful to be here. Thanks for having me. Excited to see the tour that you got to enjoy and explore an amazing arid city. I think as we're looking at networks overall, from SIF's perspective, we really try and approach everything from a systemic perspective. So we like to keep that top of mind. But I think inherently a network should be flexible and respond to the needs of the city. So I think we can keep that in mind also. But I'd suggest maybe three principles to follow for a new network. One of those is that we have seen that cities are ambitious, and sometimes they can be more ambitious than their national counterparts. So I'd really encourage the Arid Cities Network to be ambitious and encourage innovation and support that. Because what we've also seen with cities is that when one city goes further, many other cities can follow and learn from it, and even other levels of government can learn from it. So if we follow that principle of really encouraging and striving for that ambition and innovation, that will spread through the network. I think the second approach is that we should really think about carefully, almost curating how the network responds to the needs of the cities. And I've been involved with a few networks in the past, and I think what we found was sometimes when a city would come to other cities with a problem, a challenge that they're having, that they haven't found the solution for, and turn to other cities that they can learn from. And sometimes that opens up the dialogue, it opens up the collaboration, and can really, again, focus on the needs of the cities. I think we've also seen, you know, as part of that cities are excelling in multilateralism. I know currently we have some challenges there, but cities can continue that. And I think being open and honest about challenges and sharing solutions can maybe pave the way for others to follow. So I think that is really important. I think third, and responding directly to your question about, well, there are other networks out there, I think the network itself will need to work within a wider ecosystem. Now that should include the other networks. Now, we support the C40 Cities Network. I've worked a lot with ICLEI in the past. I did a quick look at some of the cities that were on the professor's list. I think only one of them is actually in the C40 currently. The focus has been on megacities. The others are in ICLEI, members of ICLEI. But I think there is potential for these cities to form around their specific challenges and then connect in with a wider network. C40 has a network called the Cool Cities Network. There's around 38 cities, including Freetown, you mentioned, that are looking at addressing these extreme heat issues. There can be learnings from them, but they're also different. They're not arid cities. So I think that's important. But also in terms of the wider ecosystem, I think the cities network will need to tap into other parts of the ecosystem, engineers, builders, developers. Buildings are going to be so important for arid cities. How do we position buildings? How do we cool buildings? And that is an incredibly important ecosystem to tap into. SIF is involved in setting up a new entity called Assemble, which is a group of foundations along with IKEA and others that are focused on really working across the buildings ecosystem with cities, states, and national governments looking at building codes and working also on corporate ambition and innovation. So I think an initiative like that could really support. So those are a few initial ideas to get us going. But I think overall we'll just look at, you know, progressing action and proving that the model can be helpful and innovative for cities.
What was that the last network you mentioned?
Assemble, was it around buildings?
Yes.
Yeah, so Assemble. So it's a new initiative with foundations and also not-for-profits getting together to look at the 37% of global emissions that come from buildings. And I think what we've recognized in the past in working with cities is that the sources of emissions are often in cities, but cities don't always have the full powers to address them, right? So we need cities to work with others to address the challenges that they're seeing in cities. So some cities have powers over building codes, for example, over planning, but in other situations, cities need to work with their national governments that maybe control the building codes, or national governments that control planning law. So what we really need to galvanize is more of an initiative around the sectors as well, and how that can dock into the specific actions that cities are trying to achieve, where they may or may not have the powers and also the finance, which will be really critical for achievement of some of the ambition.
Now you think of something like C40, and you know it is this towering entity now, and of course it involves mayors first and foremost. But I think I heard a little bit of what you're saying is that there might be a more organic beginnings to networks such as these. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think even if you look at the origins of C40, I was involved in the early days, but it was originally 20 mayors that got together under the former mayor of London, Ken Livingstone, and said, we're trying to address this climate issue. I'm sure I can learn from other cities. Can we just meet? And there are some meetings of originally 20 mayors, and then it grew from there. It then grew to about 40, which is where the name came from. My role at C40 was starting the first few networks, and we basically just asked the cities, you said, what are your top 4 issues that you are facing when you are trying to develop a climate action plan. And then we organized the cities around those issues. So we said, okay, heat, cool cities was one of the first networks. Another network was around electrification of vehicles. And we just got them in groups. And as I mentioned before, we had a city present a problem. I'm trying to roll out charging infrastructure in my city. Can't figure it out. Who's done it before? How did you do it? And it involved the mayors, but it also involved the city officials, which was very important because the mayors, like yourselves, set the incredible strategy, the ambition, but I'm sure you go back to your team and you say, now it's your turn to implement this, right? How can I help you? But it's often the officials that need to do the detailed work. So getting the officials together, the staff together, as well as the mayors to hold each other to account is really important. But it should start informal, and I think if you formalize it too much, it doesn't benefit from being a network and being organic and systemic in nature.
It's a bit of a higher wire act, though, isn't it? Because one final point about the notion of a network, an Arid Cities Network, is to consider, well, there are dry and drying cities, so that you might have interests by cities who might not have all the characteristics of arid cities that Professor Simon discussed, but they can see the writing on the wall, and they're going to be arid cities 10 years from now. So should we be keeping an open mind about those kinds of cities as well?
Yeah, it's a great question and a big concern. I mean, so many cities are worried about the effects of climate change, and heat is one of the key hazards they're experiencing. Yeah, I would suggest being open. I think you'd want to contain it a little bit, and maybe it's looking at the cities that it's more in the short term that they're facing becoming an arid or a semi-arid. They're seeing it in the near to medium term future and are coming to terms with it, need to understand it. There will be more cities, unfortunately, that will be facing that. So letting, maybe a first cohort in to learn from the others, and then keeping an eye on how that evolves and how many more cities are facing that reality. But we know we need to do much more to support cities with resilience, and facing extreme heat is absolutely top of the list. So as much as we can be helping other cities, definitely encourage that.
Opening it up a little bit, the downtown was so impressive. It also struck me as an expensive enterprise, and I wondered if you could address that. It pays off in the long run, I think we can all agree, but the district energy system alone is quite an investment, and may not be suitable for every city facing these issues.
A very good question, but if I may comment
please.
on her previous points, I think it's very important. I'm talking about our region here in Gulf area. When you want to apply such changes, you need the government support. Policy and procedure need to be updated, need to incorporate all these sustainable solutions. When it comes, for example, issuing the permit for building any buildings. So it has to go through a certain criteria where it's accomplished or address the climate changes issues when it comes to heat and power. You mentioned our district cooling system. Actually, it is a good revenue source for us once we fill the whole city. Today, we are almost 80%. occupancy, but once it's become 100%, we will be getting good revenue from that district cooling system. It is very efficient. It's been built by one of the biggest company worldwide, and the efficiency number, it's very, very in line with the green buildings concept. For your information and for the audience as well, this district has 100 LEED certificate from US GBC between platinum and gold.
Yes, please.
Which is the biggest district in the world, by the way.
That's very impressive. The situations, we have to Certainly, we need solutions that are sustainable, but that are also accessible to the millions of people that we will find in cities in dry lands. It is very important to consider solutions that could be replicable in addition to the high-tech solutions. Building materials are very important. I come from a dry land as well. So I have always wondered how my parents and my grandparents lived decently without air conditioning, under 50 degrees Celsius. It has to do with the material that is used for building. It has to do with the thickness of the walls. It has to do with air circulation. By the way, the same buildings are also hot during cold seasons. And as you know, in most deserts, you have an amplitude of temperature where it is very hot during the day and can be very cool at night at the same place. So these buildings are designed in a way that they're adapted to these situations. Someone mentioned Andalusia. I think it was Professor Simon when he mentioned Sevilla. We know that in this region, in the Sahara, people have been using underground irrigation systems from one place to another, from one farm to another, and that was almost obsolete when modern technologies were introduced and is being revived now in some parts of the world, including in Spain, where the old techniques are now being revived because underground irrigation is much more efficient than the regular modern systems we have of irrigation right now, and all the way we are irrigating our farms. So it is very important that we go back to indigenous knowledge, and we see solutions that are applicable to all in all situations. So if you look at the aridity trends that you mentioned, Professor, it is very clear, according to our scientific studies, that there will be more aridity in the world. It's growing. At the same time, it is growing in places where the population is also growing because demographics continue to grow. So out of the 580 or close to 600 cities we have right now, maybe we'll have few more 100 cities to come in the next 50 years in developing countries who do not necessarily have access to energy, will have problems sorting out their waste, including their solid waste, but also the wastewater and so forth. So how do you plan? What is the city planning system that we have in the world that will be adapted to these conditions? So therefore, the networks that we are talking about, and with all due respect to the C40, which I respect very much, it's more climate-oriented. So it is very important that we have cities that are faced with a challenge that is quite specific and that are able to unite their forces and bring solutions that are adapted to their conditions.
I want to explore a little bit the idea of long-term investment, some of which takes a lot of resources up front, and then more of a short-term or near-term, almost a triage kind of situation. Mr. Mayor, I was very troubled to hear, if you could just talk a little bit more about that the poorest residents are paying the most for water. If you can just restate how much water costs these residents, and as an example of something more of a short-term or near-term scenario that you have to confront.
Yeah, thank you. No, I explained that it's impossible to have a population of over 1 million people without any kind of water. That you need to have an emergency solution that is pumping water from the downhill.
In other words, you consider it an emergency.
It's an emergency, but you need to solve this for the next 5 years until you have a real program, but not using the officials from the municipality. You need to create foundations, in parallel to the municipality. I agree with you because they have another attitude. But you have a lot of private sector people that helps, also volunteers that helps. And also the young people proposes something new also. They talk about hydroponic domestic farms for people that has some water. It's water that is obtained by pumping water, but the people is very ingenious. They use the water for these kind of initiatives. But I think that the final solution is to create new cities in the downhill, the stable zone of the city, and to move the people from the upper zone to the new zones, to have a planified city, and we are working on that also. But it's a real political issue, and the C40, I agree, has no interest, or there is no chapter for this issue. I think that we make joint the cities in the C40 to this problem, because it's a problem for maybe half of the cities, no, about this arid situation. But let's work on that. I think that the next meeting will be in South America, maybe in Lima. We may include a chapter for this kind of solutions, no? Because everybody has a view, a part of the solution. But the holistic solution, I think that may have a proposal, no, through you, through Earthna. Thank you.
Looking at technology, if we might just explore that for a minute. For example, in the Colorado River Basin, easily 80% of the water from the Colorado River goes to agriculture and irrigation. Clearly, there are advances in irrigation technology that can be taken advantage of. And we're helping farmers explore some of that. That's just an example of the way that technological advances can help here. Would you all have reflections about the role of technology in arid cities?
Yes, very important to actually use both new technologies and old technologies. Biomimicry is one. Biomimicry is basically mimicking nature, and that can be done in designing our buildings, not necessarily more expensive, but designing in a way that is adapted to the air circulation, that is adapted to the heat, basically mimicking zebra. You know, the strips, black and white, is not by design only. It is because they want to regulate the temperature in the body. And if you mimic nature and you build you have your buildings adapted to the animals that you see around you or the birds you see around you, then you certainly will learn from them. And that is being done. There's a whole technology, and I think more than 100 designs of buildings have been imagined so far using that. But it's also using new technologies in terms of just the building materials that we use at the moment and the way we imagine air circulation in these buildings. Look, the materials we use right now for our buildings are not adapted to aridity. Cement, metal sheets, whatever you have is all designed for, and glasses and everything that we have in our buildings today. They are very nice, they are very effective, but they are not designed for aridity. So it is therefore important that we think about, and it is a whole chapter in the way we actually work with engineers, with architects, to design something that is adapted to that situation. We have to do it. At the same time, see what can we take from the old technologies of our parents and grandparents that can be replicable today and make our life much easier. By the way, it can be modern. it can be nice, it could be, but it is also climate efficient, it is environmentally friendly, and certainly more. We are seeing in most cities now, people are going back to old buildings, to old materials that were being used in villages are being now built in cities because mayors of these cities have realized that it is less carbon intensive, but at the same time beautiful. So it can be nice.
Other thoughts on the role of technology?
We can go back to future, I would say, right?
Back to the future.
Well, I can give one example of the technology here in our development. We are taking advantage of the water coming from the rain. We collect all the water coming through the system. We have very good system underground, plus the condensation that's coming from the air conditions. Also, we collect those waters. And we reuse it again in all our irrigation and the flushing in the toilet. So that is part of the 70% that I mentioned earlier when it comes to saving. Nowadays, those technology is affordable, and you have, as he mentioned, hundreds of solutions that engineer can be implemented during your design. You need to design something very simple, very elegant, rooted in the past, but talking about today modernity when it's come to the language or the shape of the buildings. And Musharraf downtown Doha can be used as a real example. We have a long list of issues and solutions and lessons learned actually that can be helped when it comes to networking with other cities who would like to go with these initiatives.
In our final minutes here, just perhaps some closing thoughts by each of you. Does an Arid Cities Network sound like a good idea? Final thoughts.
Definitely a good idea, and we explained why. And clearly, whether it is a network on its own or a chapter within another network, that is not for me to decide, but it is very important that this exchange be established and very specific, because these people, we have not even talked about transport and how difficult it is in dry land. So I think it is important to do it.
I think it's very important and to continue such a dialogue and also knowledge sharing with all the participants. The only issue I have is the name. If we can rename that ICN to something else, maybe city with climate challenges or something like that instead of Arid City. That's it.
And you would consider, yes? You would consider being part of this, perhaps, an Arid Cities Network? Is it a good idea?
Yes, a good idea, but I think that we need to create a chapter in C40, focus on this, because now there is an organization that has a lot of people working, but need to put this like a real issue that affects not only to arid cities. In Peru, we have cities without water, but with water in the zone. Then you were mentioning that cities without water, but there is a possibility to provide water to the poor people, especially. No? But I think that yes, but maybe it's useful to go through institutions that now are operating in the world.
Already established. All right. Terry Wells, you'll have the last word. Do you mind doing that?
I do. I think there is a need, and I think there will be a huge amount of benefit from creating one where it lives. I think that's a bigger question. But I think, and I'm sure that can be resolved, I think what's important is that it includes a wider number of cities, the cities that Ibrahim, you were talking about, the secondary cities, the smaller cities that currently are facing challenges and will in the future, and thinking about how to encompass that scale as well as supporting the cities that are facing some of these challenges currently. So, but yeah, absolutely support the vision.
Well, we all might be coming back to you for further guidance and wisdom And please join me in thanking our distinguished panelists for this great conversation. And our heartfelt thanks to the Earthna Summit, which I think has been a great success, and the Qatar Foundation, and welcoming us all to Doha. Thank you. Thank you all.